is money being pumped into agriculture that's not just going to the price of land?
Yeah, absolutely. It's probably as robust as it's ever been, to be honest. And a lot of it people don't see. So the Dusty Riches of the world, who I know really well from my past at Syngenta and when I was at Syngenta Venture Capital, and it isn't really visible to the average person. Yeah, if you subscribe to Ag Funder online or something like that, you'd probably get the odd update, but most of it's still sort of occurring in the shadows, I would say, of ag. Right. Most farmers don't touch it right away. These are companies that are still 2 or 3, 4 years from revenue. There's some big names, obviously, the Indigos, the Inaris, Pivot Bio, Sound Ag, that all have a lot of things going on that we read about it. We see a lot of tweets and a lot of posts online, but that attracts a lot of attention. But then at the same time, there's a ton of companies in behind the scenes that are trying to do little things like get an API that works better to transfer data from one software piece to another. So it's not so frustrating for farmers with multiple logins and multiple places they have to go. Right. So, and then, automation, we hear a lot about. There's just an acquisition by John Deere last week of Bear Flag Robotics. Right. And then, I think the part that I always find interesting is even, that, of course, the guys in Iowa, the farmers in Iowa maybe not see as much of, but around the world, right, there's some tremendous innovation happening in Europe on biologicals. There's great innovation, in different routes to market in Southeast Asia, fintech markets starting to build up to help smallholder farms get into the market, get access to credit. All those things are really cool that people don't really see every day. It's like I said, it's sort of lurking in the shadows of the corn and soybean fields in the I-states and kind of the heart of the Midwest.
Ag's such a weird thing for innovation because when you're talking about whether it's seeds and genetics or chemistry, things that you're going to apply over the top of them, they are so heavily regulated that it seems like the only companies that have a chance to get something all the way through to market are the big four that remain. And so, like, what's your take on the lack of innovation, or maybe that's just my assumption. There's a lack of innovation around seed genetics and chemistry because of that.
No doubt. Look, 80% of seed is controlled by 4 companies, right? Probably it's 60 to 70% of chemistry is controlled by those same 4 companies. So it's easy for anyone to go, hey, this feels like if it's not up to those 4, who the heck gets it done, right? And I always find that where you have to look for the innovation, it very well may be Bayer or Corteva or Syngenta bringing a product to market that final, 2 yards across the goal line. But what the really neat stuff that's happening right now is in the background, right? Where companies like Encochem or Inari or whatever are shrinking that development time down, and they're solving some problems on the front end. Encochem is using machine learning, like really deep tech machine learning, artificial intelligence to start to be able to get to screening chemistry and molecules better. So, the classic, Syngenta, I spent 25 years at Syngenta, and we would do the tours to Switzerland and look at all this great chemistry screening process where it's, hundreds of thousands of compounds a month being screened and tested from a chemistry standpoint, what works, what has low tox, what selective to the weed, but not to the plant, all those things, or the crop that you're trying to spray. And what companies like Encochem are doing is saying, hey, we don't have to have this massive warehouse of robotic spraying plants every hour and testing these things out. We can do it all through AI and automation. And so that's where I think the innovation is happening in the back end. Now, granted, Encochem is not going to spend the $300 million in regulatory fees and testing to get it all the way there. But if they can start to shrink the development time where, a company like BASF can go to them and say, hey, what we're really looking for is, compound A to solve problem, 1 and 2 in this crop, which is a major issue, this fungal disease in this crop. And it has to be, we have to have a reentry period of 24 hours. We have to have, the ability to spray it multiple times a season without resistance building or whatever. then they go to solve that problem using the AI and things like machine learning, which to me is really cool. And again, most people don't ever really hear about that, right? Like this is kind of early stage. It's going to be probably the Bayer, the Corteva, or Syngenta name on the jug at some point. But, in order to get that problem solved, all that happened in behind the scenes in a compressed period of time, compared to the 10, 12, 14 years that we've always been told at the farmer meetings, right? To get from, the initial plot to the field, it's a 14-year, $500 million process. And this is reducing the cost to get it there, reducing the length of time. So, we can be more proactive as companies to solve these problems. And Inari is doing the same thing in seeds. There's other companies using epigenetics, like Sound Ag is using epigenetics, which is basically turning down the volume of a gene or turning it up. That's my layman's term for how epigenetics works. But, it's these sort of things that, are helping compress the development time, right? You can get through it faster than the traditional, Gregor Mendel behind the monastery, crossing plants and seeing which pea looks best after crossing them, back 200-300 years ago, right?
Yeah, as you're describing this, some of it I think we see go on right now. So I have a good friend as a data scientist for what was Monsanto, now Bayer. I watched them get much, much faster. But I am also really skeptical of the claims of machine learning and artificial intelligence, because I would sit in those meetings and I would be like, I hear you talking about, not you, but the guy explaining it. And I'm like, I think you're using words in the same way that people were like, everything should be cloud-based and, like all these buzzwords. Yeah. And to me, that really, I can understand why ag doesn't see innovation there, because in addition to it being like the innovation first comes out in a very small place before it gets widely adopted, but also there was a whole lot of promise of these innovative technologies just revolutionizing things. And I think there's a lot of companies, particularly those ones using, what's this new investment tool, SPACs. Those I'm incredibly suspicious of those things. What's your take on the SPAC market?
Well, I'm also incredibly suspicious because, right, there's not the rigor that I'm used to seeing, you're used to seeing to go public, right? So,
what is a SPAC for people? I couldn't describe it. I have read of them.
A special purpose acquisition company. We should probably just have CNBC on in the background right now, Vance, instead of me trying to explain it, but we'll give it a try. So it's a special purpose acquisition company. So basically, let's assume, let's live in a real fairy tale world where I'm worth like $400 billion. And I've went and registered a SPAC, the Steen, Special Agricultural SPAC Fund, as a company on Wall Street with the NYSE, but there's nothing there. So basically, my S1 filing is just, it'll be a $4 billion company someday, but today there's no revenues, there's no costs, there's no nothing. It's just a shell. But I've paid the money to register it, and so the regulatory red tape is a lot less because there's really nothing there. And then what I do is then I go out and say, I want to buy Sound Ag, and I fold it into my SPAC. And now Sound Ag didn't have to file their own S1 or anything like that. I just went out and purchased them and brought them in. Now Sound Ag's got to have proper revenues and proper accounting practices and, follow GAAP accounting and all the stuff you have to do because, day one, now they're a public company. But I've used my SPAC as a way to sort of reduce the regulatory framework to bring these companies in. So you have to be a little bit wary, right, as consumer like the consumer investor, right, because there hasn't been as much scrutiny to these companies. Whereas if you and I wanted to start our own public company tomorrow, we're going to be hundreds of pages of filings, and we're going to spend 6 months on the road with bankers convincing them that this is, with the Goldman Sachs of the world, trying to convince them that this is a real company and we've got real revenues and we have our costs under control and all those sort of things. And you kind of skip a step or two with the SPAC. That's my
and I think so. The part of that you had in there. The part that you had in there that's interesting that people might not realize is the person that the company that your SPAC buys and throws into that SPAC now all of a sudden just can be publicly traded. So people can invest hundreds of millions of dollars into this thing, and there hasn't been the same, like, have you proved your revenue? Do you, like, all of the steps that normally go on. And so you watch some of these companies that are like, I think your technology is pie in the sky, but now that you're in this SPAC and people can ride this wave. And I'm very much of the mindset, like, let people invest in whatever they want to invest in. Don't put a bunch of regulators in there. But the only reason you have SPACs is because the ordinary way, I think, has gotten very gummed up with regulatory burden.
Yeah, true. And, don't forget the SPAC, like, let's throw in some terms like regenerative ag and sustainability and climate change. And then all of a sudden, hey, boy, that sounds like they're, and to your point, these little machine learning or AI, buzzwords along the way, and voila, here we go.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you'd like to listen to the rest of the interview, it's linked below. And if you like this kind of conversation, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. That's a place where people meet other podcast listeners, get to be a part of a digital neighborhood, and really get a chance to practice things like how they write, their speaking skills, and have a place where they can have an open dialogue with people that want to discuss ideas and leave all of the insults and the craziness of regular social media out of it. So if you're interested, go to network.articulate.ventures.